Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and everything in between. Welcome back to Geeks Watch. Today, I want to talk about a 1980s film called The Blues Brothers, an image of which you will see here. Blues Brothers is a creation of Saturday Night Live, the original Saturday Night Live cast, alumni of Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi. The overall plot of the film, which there will be a little bit of spoilers of here, without too much detail, but the plot's sort of a redemption arc for Jake, Joliet, Jake, and Elwood Blues, the Blues Brothers. Overall story arc is like starts. Jake gets out of prison. His brother meets him there. They go back to the orphanage which they were raised to meet the nun whom they call the Penguin. She tells him that they owe $5,000 in back taxes, which in 1980s was a lot bigger number than it is today. But they also meet with the janitor, an old black guy named Curtis, who introduced them to blues music. The Penguin and Curtis, the only family they've ever had. They are inspired to raise the money by getting the band back together. So what follows after that is they, since Jake has been in prison, they've all gotten other jobs. They have to go in and they collect the band. They have they try and get a gig. They're not very successful. They manage to corner and persuade an old booking agent that they knew to get them a big venue so that they can earn the money. Along the way of doing this, they manage to aggravate a lot of people. The Chicago police, or well, the Illinois Police Department, a country band who they stole a gig from, and a bunch of Nazis who they ran off the road. So they advertise this big night, this big concert. They all show up. They do the show. They have to sneak out of the show. Big chase ensues of them trying to avoid the people who want to, either arrest them, beat the crap out of them, or kill them, to get to the Cook County Assessor's Office to pay the money that they have earned to stop them from closing the orphanage down and throwing the kids, the Penguin and Curtis, out on the streets. That is the overall plot of the story. The Blues Brothers themselves, the origins are, a lot of people think it was a Saturday Night Live sketch that they did. That wasn't quite true. Dan Aykroyd has long been a fan of blues music. He actually rented a bar near the SNL studios that he would go to after, on his spare time, and he would invite the SNL cast to go with him. He introduced John Belushi to the music. John Belushi fell in love with the blues music as well. He's like playing all the time. I love this music. Because they were up on stage with the groups that were playing at the bar all the time, someone jokingly said, "You should guys call yourself the Blues Brothers." It actually originated from a skit called The Bees, where they had some bees performing some music on stage, and John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd were on there in bee suits with hats and sunglasses, and they kind of that migrated into the Blues Brothers act. Their first performances actually for the band were they opened it for Steve Martin during his comedy tour. They actually opened for one show, The Grateful Dead, and they actually did a live album. Well, they put out a live album based on their opening for Steve Martin's comedy act, which was a big hit. And they negotiated a movie deal. They couldn't get someone to write the script. Dan Aykroyd, who had never written a screenplay or read one, wrote it himself. And it basically ended up being this massive, over 300-page volume of notes, which they then handed off to the director, John Landis, to turn into a script. Dan Aykroyd was insistent that they have actual blues players and performers in the movie. James Brown, Aretha Franklin, Cab Calloway, and Ray Charles all have bit parts in the film. Small parts, but they're still semi-important characters. Movie studios didn't like it because it put them over budget. There's some other production problems too. John Belushi was heavily doing drugs during the production of this film, and it put production behind schedule. He would miss shoots. He would show up late. He would just crash in his trailer and not come out. They eventually had to hire someone full time to keep him away from drugs, which wasn't always successful. An addict wants what an addict wants, and he was addicted to drugs. So yeah, that put a strain on the filmmaking process. One thing I wanted to mention too, there at the end of the film, there's a big long car chase. You know, when they're trying to escape from the police and the Nazis and the country band. They wound up buying like 60 cars at an auction for like $400 a pop. And at the time of the film's release, the Blues Brothers held the record for the most cars destroyed in a single film. I don't know if they still do, but at the time, they destroyed so many cars. At some point, it was just silly. It's like, are they destroying cars just for the fun of it? And it kind of looks like they were. Other not so pleasant news, which was surprised me when I was looking into this film. Tim Mann, who owned Mann's Theaters, who owned a huge chain of movie theaters on the West Coast, on the day after the editing was done, pulled John Landis, the director, aside and said he was not going to release this. He was not going to put this in any of his white neighborhoods. He was not going to release this in white neighborhoods. One, because he didn't want black people going to those theaters. And two, he didn't think white people would want to see a movie that had all black musicians in it. So this film did actually not get a wide movie theater release, as big as most other films you would expect. Another reason too is that by the time the film was released and finished, John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd had left Saturday Night Live. John Belushi was in a film that was kind of a commercial flop, so people didn't think it would do very well because, you know, they weren't in the public eye as much. They weren't seen as very popular as they used to be. So it surprised a lot of people when this film came in second place in the box office behind Empire Strikes Back. This film was released around the same time. And yeah, this film was actually a huge hit. I mean, the numbers don't sound big today. It made like $7 million its opening weekend, which these days sounds like trash, but you got to figure 45 years ago when this film was released, you know, because of inflation and stuff, that was a lot of money back then, especially for, you know, this film, I think for the year finished like, I think 18th place total for the year as far as gross box office receipts. This film was actually a pretty big hit. One of the reasons I wanted to talk about this film, that brought this to my attention, is something that I learned about Dan Aykroyd and his love of the blues. Aykroyd and Belushi have been accused of cultural appropriation. You know, what are a bunch of white guys doing singing the blues? And this film was their love letter to the blues. They loved the blues. They weren't trying to say they were great blues musicians. They didn't write any of their own music, and they were always very, very clear to credit the people who originated these songs. This was their love letter to the blues. Their music performances. When John Belushi died of an overdose, he and Dan Aykroyd were actually just starting to talk about doing a third album, which unfortunately never got made because of John Belushi's death. But you know, they love these musicians. They love this music. And when they were doing this stuff, the studios actually pressured Dan Aykroyd to buy the rights to the music. It's like, these guys are old. Nobody knows about them anymore. Nobody cares about them anymore. You could probably offer them chump change to buy the rights to the music, and then you would own it and could perform it whenever you want. You wouldn't have to pay them anything. And Dan Aykroyd refused to do that. He's like, no. We'll keep the proceeds from touring, you know, from our own merchandise and stuff, but we are giving all of them 100% royalty fees. And they did that for the films, for the albums that they performed. Dan Aykroyd made sure to credit every single one of the artists that he and John Belushi covered. and made sure they got paid and paid well. And because of their advocacy, it revitalized a lot of these people's careers. You know, it introduced a whole new generation of people who had, you know, never heard of these, you know, of these artists. And someone whose name I can't remember. I'm trying to remember their names, and now I'm just drawing a blank because I'm an old fart and my brain is mush. But you know, Dan Aykroyd really, stood by his guns. The studios wanted to cut these people out to keep more profits for themselves, and Dan Aykroyd flatly refused. He demanded these people get their royalties. He demanded these people be part of this film because he wanted them in his part. He wanted them as part of the project. This project was about his love of the blues, and he wanted the people who he respected and admired and appreciated to be a part of it, to do it with him. And the movie doesn't take itself too seriously. The plot is pretty basic. It's got some fun twists and turns, and it is a fun movie to watch. But again, it doesn't take the plot very seriously. But the music itself, this is a musical. It's got musical dance numbers. The music is an integral part of the film. Not just as the performances of people who are playing it, you've got scenes where someone is, playing music on the radio, or you've got some old street performer playing boom, boom, boom. I think it's Johnny Walker. I want to say Johnny Walker, but I'm probably wrong. I can't remember the artist's name. It's escaped me at the moment. But yeah, but then you've got like Ray Charles running a music store and selling the guys instruments for the band, and the whole of him like playing the keyboard to try and show them the instruments are good, breaks into a song and dance number with people dancing in the streets. So it's unusual to see a film that is this much of a musical, and I'm not sure people even realize that it is, because I don't know, but it is. But for all that it's worth, for all that Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi wanted to do for this, and for revitalizing the careers of people that deserve better from the music studios, I do think this film is worth watching. And even so, it is a fun film. It's full of cameos. Frank Oz makes a cameo appearance. Twiggy, who was a prominent model and part-time actress of the day, has a cameo. Steven Spielberg has a cameo as just a guy in the Cook County's assessor office eating a sandwich. I didn't realize it was Steven Spielberg for years. Lots of other cameo appearances. This film is just fun to watch, and if you like the blues music, it's fun to listen to. I've got the soundtrack. Soundtrack kicks ass. I would definitely recommend this film to anyone who loves the music, and just a fun watch. As always, thanks for watching. As always, my stuff is crap. And until next time, good hunting.